Though ignored upon release, Raymond Chandler's Philip Marlowe serial came to define an epoch in American history. A scorchingly acerbic portrayal of a Los Angeles consumed by corruption, distinctively Californian malaise pervading each syllable, with Chandler's burst of lyricism enough to lure both hardboiled aficionados and casuals. In the middle of it all, a private detective and his rarely noble, often necessary John for the very labyrinth of perfidy and pervasion. Far removed from the brilliance and sophistication of private detectives, Marlowe closer resembles a man who perhaps in his youth idolized the professionalism of Sam Spade before quickly seeing through it, instead becoming coarse, boorish, rarely supercilious, and fearless only because economic factors necessitated, yet in his conflation of work and life, deeply tied to a romanticized view of the detective, a longing for a raison d'etre. Following the pervasive success of Double Indemnity, Chandler and his work became hot commodity in the eyes of producers and audiences alike. With the noir papers ready to suffuse Hollywood, Marlowe turned into prime material for the big screen overnight. Over the years, the unique vision of the Chicago-born LA writer saw numerous interpretations, most notably by two men who differed so largely that one can't quite fathom they played the same character.
All of a sudden, you get quiet.
You lost your book of answers, or you're just waiting for your lawyer?
Maybe you don't think murder looks so good on you.
Maybe I didn't do it.
Big Powell, who enjoyed great success as a romantic lead in comedies and musicals throughout much of the 1930s and early 40s, might not have been everyone's first name to come to mind when considering casting a crime thriller, but the actor, presumably stung with presentiments of decline, remained ardent in his desire to shift away from what had made him popular. Having been rejected by Wilder for the role of Neff in Double Indemnity, he turned to RKO, which has recently reacquired the rights to Chandler's Farewell My Lovely, and, despite the offer's initial doubt, became Marlowe. Directed by Edward Dmytryk, at this point scarcely known for his Dalton Trumbull-penned Tender Comrade of the prior year, had made a tiny name for himself churning out profusions of unremarkable, albeit economic thrillers during the war. Murder My Sweet would be his big hit and Powell's great revival. In spite of Chandler's entirely justified skepticism and the fact that Powell and Marlowe don't magically seem together, one may nonetheless argue that it's precisely because of this, Powell's lack of baggage, that allowed him to slide effortlessly into the role. After all, his crime debut coincided with Marlowe's on-screen counterpart. It recalls the phrase fish out of water, which also plays into the identity of Marlowe himself, where he seems to entangle himself in conspiracies far bigger than himself, far outweighing what he seems to know. Much of his resignation to sarcasm comes from him being an outsider, and using Powell, like was an outsider, to convey such is fitting. Visually, this is made all the more apparent. In the opening scene, Marlowe is shown blindfolded, first meant literally, later figuratively. In most of the encounters he details come at the behest of the other person. Moose visits him at the office, Marriott and Anne do likewise, and Velma shows up at his apartment. Through it, he is deprived of his agency, that which effectualizes the shamus, instead becoming an object used by those above him. He's not the mastermind who solves all, but a mere peasant atop a chess table, bludgeoned, drugged, and discarded when stepping out of line. All that remains is his futile wit, of which he seems often aware, and his callous humor. His lack of agency reaches its peak during the film's climax, where Dmitri makes abundantly clear that Marlowe is all but a bystander, futilely watching Grail kill Moose and being blinded by the vehemence of the shot as he tries to prevent it. The flashback ends, and we return to the image of him blindfolded. Powell's ragdolled Marlowe complements many of Chandler's personal experiences and grievances, aspirations of great meaning, with him as a grand prodigy, entering Hollywood as Powell enters the Grail Palace, confident before being consumed and confronted with one's own secondariness, a realization thereof that spreads throughout the film as it does Chandler's post-1944 novels. Chandler came to enthuse over Powell's Marlowe, that is, until a second adaptation came to be. The Big Sleep is a terrific piece of tomfoolery, a fantasy that has little to do with Chandler's vision. Eddie Mueller wrote fittingly of a film that serves as a continuation of the Hawksian ethos of good film over good adaptation. Bogart plays Marlowe and turns him into an intrepid womanizer, who's rarely seen a minute without female companionship. Though initially belittled for his inferior height, this bogey is all but a weakling, as he repeatedly shows at intellectual and physical confrontations alike. His imperturbable gallantry places him in natural opposition to the disarray of both Chandler and Powell. Whereas Powell clung to each victory, no matter how tiny, Bogart is elevated to superhero status, remaining in control and overcoming each obstacle, all with a hearty smile and unblemished suit. His sartorial slickness, so typical of Hawk's protagonist, contraposing the unshaven, messy madness of Powell's Marlowe. As William Everson, in his classic The Detective in Film, points out, the novelty of Powell contributed heavily to a good portrayal of Marlowe. He overcame him more easily than Bogart, who by 1944 already juggled several identities, Marlowe being just another hue thereof. He was Spade, he was Rick, he was Steve, and most importantly, he was Bogart. Entirely in line with Hawk's aforementioned ethos, the role then is a great Bogart rather than a great Marlowe. Bogart was the Marlowe that Chandler had wanted Marlowe to be, but Powell was the one that he actually was.
You did all right, Jonesy. But you left me high and dry.
Both Big Sleep and Murder My Sweet turned up big successes, necessitating in the minds of studio heads further adaptations to capitalize on this newfound interest in the murky. There is a reason, however, why many of the following versions are rarely ever discussed. Lady in the Lake, aside from its much derided gimmick, has little to offer. It is clunky, belying its initial intention of complete subjectivity, and as George Montgomery is a version of Marlowe unrecognizable from the novels, carrying no spirit at all. About as dull, if not duller, than the technique he hides behind. Luckily, he would go on to direct the far superior Ride the Pink Horse the same year. The Brasher the Balloon, adapted from Chandler's underappreciated third novel The High Window, was Fox's attempt at Marlowe, and it is telling that the film turned out the last adaptation of the Golden Period. Paul Montgomery's Marlowe is as far away as his namesake was, existing by now as a crass parody of what was once considered a noble profession, but given its B-film status, it is allowed the occasionally raunchy and desperate glimmer, especially the sequences within Marlowe's office.
How about running out and seeing Mr. Blair now?
The late 1960s and 70s saw a brief revival of Marlowe, his suit worn by James Garner, Robert Mitchum, and Elliot Gould alike. The Mitchum films change age and location, neither befitting the original vision, but Mitchum imbues him with a longing melancholy only an aging star could provide.
You just slept a big sleep, not caring about the nastiness of how you died or where you fell.
Gould's Marlowe, on the other hand, is far more leisured.
Hey, Marlowe? No, my name is Sidney Jenkins. Come on,
A clear product of the counterculture. Now no longer restrained by studio finery, Gould is allowed to saunter, becoming as much flaneur as Dick, yet still carrying with him that very malaise Chandler often insinuated, obvious to most, but hidden deeply behind veneers of detachment and insouciance. Chandler's novels were scarcely apt material for filmic adaptations, often due to their heavy reliance on prose and subordination of plot to character and atmosphere. It is then no surprise that many attempts failed, but Powell and Dimitri struck gold, seemingly understanding what lay beneath the ignorance of a small, insignificant detective.
You know, I think you're nuts.
You go barging around without a very clear idea what you're doing. Everybody bats you down, smacks you over the head, fills you full of stuff, and you keep right on hitting between tackle and end. I don't think you even know which side you're on.
I don't know which side anybody's on. I don't even know who's playing today.